here in the UK, there are reports that the UK and our allies will investigate that explosion at the hospital in Gaza City, which left hundreds feared dead. We're joined now by Foreign Affairs Analyst James Marlow. Is that normal in this sort of war situation, James, for a bombing like that to be investigated by an independent authority?
Well, there's so much international focus on this, it is unusual, but in the case when it comes to Israel, because the news has suddenly turned very much against Israel, because 12 days ago it was very much for Israel, after that, I was going to say, the atrocity, the worst terrorist at the massacre, but I've seen videos of it goes much deeper, and the whole focus has now changed towards Gaza because of the humanitarian corridor, because of the bombing. Let me just try and give you a brief rundown of what's happened in the last 12 hours, because it's so much, and it's so much unfolding, as you would expect in a wartime. Firstly, that's a really good comprehensive roundup that Charlie's just given us. There has been some infiltration from the north of Israel, which is from Lebanon itself. My phone was just alerting me to say that rockets were still being fired from Gaza. This is into the south of the country as well, so they still have a huge amount of ammunition and many, many, many more rockets, long range as well as medium range, to fire back into Israel. One of the issues, if we look yesterday as to what took place, I mean, Hamas were looking for some type of a public relations opportunity, and many of their spokespeople have been interviewed for the last few days, and they've claimed that absolutely no Israeli civilians were ever killed. They've claimed as well that they've got 200 hostages, they're being looked after. Israel says it's 199 to the best of their knowledge, but they were looking for some type of an opportunity. Now, Hamas and Islamic Jihad were firing these rockets from Gaza City, which is the reason why Israel asked the civilians to get out of the way. And questions weren't being asked as to where you'd go. Just get out of the city, because we needed to take out more of the infrastructure of Hamas and their underground cities, underground tunnels, underground bunkers. And they are literally cities. There's many tunnels which go all the way from Gaza City, all the way down south to Han Yunis. It's massive. And that's where their arsenal of weapons are as well. So they put out a statement to say that initially 300 were dead because of an Israeli bomb that had hit the hospital, and then it was 500. Then some reports said 800. And at the same time, I was watching what was taking place, because I've been monitoring the Israeli news right across the spectrum, that the bombardment of missiles coming from Gaza City inside of southern Israel, inside of Gaza to southern Israel, and also towards the Tel Aviv area and the areas around there, Petah Tikva, Bnei Brak, Ramat Gan and those areas, they were under a heavy bombardment. At the same time, this press release got released. Now, the news networks went directly to the IDF and the spokespeople and said, what have you got to say? What's going on? So this was the press release from Hamas to say that this strike was committed by Israel? Within a few minutes. Within moments, absolutely. Now, naturally, Israel have said that, well, we don't know, we're looking into this. And there was so much pressure, and I know what it's like, because I've been in those rooms before in Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv, when so much pressure happens, because Israel's gone through this many times beforehand, 5 or 6 times since Hamas has taken over. So they said, please, give us a chance to look at exactly where we were operating, where our bombs hit, and exactly the footage of what we've got, because they record everything, and every bomb that gets released, they've got lawyers next to them making sure that they're within the parameters of international law. So it's quite a professional operation. And plus as well, Israel is known to be the 4th largest or most successful air force in the entire world. So their precision bombing is pretty accurate. Of course, mistakes happen. Now, you turn that with Islamic Jihad and Hamas, their rockets, which are just being fired off from civilian areas into civilian areas with the objective of just taking out as many civilians as possible. And we know from the last war in 2021, when Islamic Jihad were firing rockets into Israel, one of them specifically dropped down into a kindergarten. I remember. Now, there were journalists around who heard about this. It was tweeted out by Palestinian humanitarian aid. That tweet was very quickly, within 15 minutes, and I got a copy of it on my phone, but within 15 minutes it disappeared. James, so they have that experience of their rockets not... As a foreign affairs analyst who has a great understanding of this area as well, you're obviously very, very good at understanding and disseminating information that as is coming in. How can our viewers and listeners know what is true and what is not? Are there sources that you trust? I can see a wry smile on your face. Well, that is a difficult... It's an enormous question, of course. I think in many cases, to be fair, some people have picked their side already.
Yeah.
So before this incident happened last night, they already know who's the good guy and who's the bad guy.
And nothing will convince either side.
It seems to be, no, that's not the case, because hence you've got, I was going to say, the build-up of riots, I was going to say, but certainly large demonstrations now in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Turkey. We're going to see those across Europe.
Yeah.
They're supporters of the Palestinians. They loathe Israel. They hate Israel. And it's a great shame, because Israel is trying to do what it should be doing, and that is give out the evidence, and it worked on it for just over 2 hours. And it was another press release this morning, and it gave a talk to journalists, which I heard some of the audio when I was coming in here this morning. I was listening to some of the audio, which actually just said that it's not our rockets, when we hit specific Hamas infrastructure, it leaves a crater. And the other thing as well is that the IDF...
And there is no crater in this instance.
But the IDF have been very quick to actually give a huge amount of evidence to suggest that
James,
Hamas have done nothing.
Just to get this very clear, from your point of view, the evidence suggests strongly, on balance, that this was not an Israeli missile, this was not an Israeli bomb, this was not an Israeli strike. It was a failed Palestinian rocket.
I have to tell you that on my way over here, I heard from a British journalist who's not particularly favourable towards Israel. He speaks very much from the Palestinian point of view, and he's in Ramallah, and he said that the comprehensive evidence that the IDF have offered is quite compelling, and Hamas and Islamic Jihad has offered absolutely nothing.
Now, why does it matter? Here's the point. I think what I've realised as we've been on air this morning is why this matters, because it matters in terms of the Jordanians particularly and their relationship with America, with Biden, because they pulled out of that meeting today because they believed that Israel had bombed that hospital. If it is proven that they did not, does that change that?
I'm not sure that they believe that. I don't think the Jordanian government and the Egyptian government, I'm not sure that they're convinced. They're aware of who Hamas is. They're aware of who Islamic Jihad is. They're also their enemies to the Gulf states. These are Islamists who want to take down certainly the Egyptian government, Jordanian government. They'd love to take down the Hashemite kingdom. They would love to take down the kings of the Gulf states. But there's public diplomacy in the making over here. And they recognise that they have an audience, they have a population, they have their own people in the country who are very much anti-Israel, and they have to play towards their people. It's just, I can assure you from the telephones that are taking place, not in front of cameras, not in front of microphones, it's a different type of story. But now, it's much larger, because what you're going to see is people taking sides, and no doubt in the next few days, and certainly in the coming weekend, we're here in London right now, you're going to see the demonstrations build up outside the Israeli embassy.
Why would then King Abdullah of Jordan agreed to a meeting with Joe Biden and then pulled out? Why would he have agreed in the first place?
Jordan is a country... King Abdullah is from the Hashemite kingdom, but Jordan is a country where there is about 75 to 80% of its population are Palestinian Arabs. It goes back through the British Mandate, because the original British Mandate included the whole of Transjordan, so a huge amount of their population, and a lot of their population, is very anti-Israel. Yeah. Certainly they have MPs in the Jordanian parliament that stand up and say the most ridiculous things about Israel. At the same time, King Abdullah is a good person, and the background, the history of the Hashemite kingdom has generally been very moderate. So we can go much deeper into that, but obviously time helps.
James,
it doesn't help
absolutely
us.
fascinating.
Thank you, James.
James Marlow there. Thank you so much for joining us.